Okay, for our first homework problem, number 1A, we're given this scenario with 3 cyclists, and we're asked the question, how fast did each person travel for the first 4 hours? Explain. Well, to do this and explain it, you need to know that we're dealing with 3 different things here with all these problems. We're working with distance in miles, time in hours, and a rate, which will be miles per hour. To figure out any one of these, this is what you need to know, the math you'll need to do. So to find distance, you'll always multiply the time times the rate. To find a time, you'll divide the distance by the rate, and to find the rate, you'll divide the distance by the time. Let me show you how the first one is done here. For Francine, she went 18 miles in 4 hours. According to this up here, to find how fast she went, we would do the distance divided by the time. She went 18 miles. And she did that in 4 hours. And when we take 18 divided by 4, we'll get 4.5 miles per hour. That's how fast she went in 4 hours. 18 miles in 4 hours came out to be 4.5 miles per hour. Okay, for 1B, the question asks, assume that each person continues at this rate. Find the distance each person traveled in 6 hours. Now, to find out how far someone traveled, far is distance, you can use this equation, the time times the rate. Now we already know the rate, so for, again, Francine, she was going 4.5 miles per hour. To find out how far she went, the distance, all we've got to do is take the time, which is 6 hours, 6 hours, and multiply it by the rate. So we go 6 times 4.5, that's hours, and this is miles per hour, and we would get 27 miles, I think. Miles. Notice that we have hours here and hours there, and they kind of cancel each other out, and all we're left with is the miles. So that's how you'd figure out how far each of the riders went in 6 hours. Multiply their rate times the time, or the time times the rate, and you'll get the distance. Okay, for problem 2, for problem 2A, it asks you to graph the distance of all 3 people on the same coordinate axis. And what they're asking you to do is, if you've got an x, y axis, you would graph the distance, say on the y-axis, distance, and the time down here in hours, and this is in miles. And you'd create a graph plotting the points of distance over time for each rider. And your graph will look something like this. If you don't have graph paper, try to do the best you can, but I'll provide some in class. For B, you don't need the graph to figure this out. You can just simply use what you learned from problem 1, and you could figure out the distance each person traveled. You can figure out the distance that each person traveled by simply, again, distance is the time times the rate. So for, again, Francine, she was traveling at over 2.5 hours, she was traveling at a rate of 4.5 miles per hour, and we multiply those two, and we'll get her distance. The time times the rate will give us the distance, and she should have gone about 11.25 miles. You can figure out the rest in problem 2 by simply doing the math, and use this as a model. But remember, to find the distance, you multiply the time by the rate. Okay, for problem 3a, it asks you, for each writer, write an equation you can use to calculate the distance traveled after a given number of hours. Now, I've already helped you out with this. I've told you that distance can be found by multiplying the time times the rate. So, for example, Francine, again, she had a rate consistently of 4.5 miles per hour. So she was 4.5 miles per hour. Now, to write an equation to calculate how far she went, her distance, regardless of any time, you could use t as the variable here and just say t times 4.5 miles per hour is going to give you the distance, no matter what, for Francine. So if you have 10 hours, you'd multiply it by 10 hours, you'd multiply it by 4.5 miles per hour, and you'd get 45 miles. No matter what you put in for t, the time, as long as it's in hours, you'll get the distance if you use this equation. So try it for the other ones. And the rest of 3 you should be able to figure out through just this example, I hope. If you have trouble, let me know.